get to it. For those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Adrienne Turner, and I am the training manager for the Tri-County Community Network, which is a collaborative that supports other nonprofit organizations. And these trainings are being offered based on your organization's partnership with TCN. So a lot of great things are happening despite what our world situation is. TCN is spearheading a lot of different efforts to support the various nonprofits that are partners with us. Holly, is that you? I'm going to unmute you because I think I'm in control here. Well, I'm clicking unmute and it's not unmuting you. Oh, that's not good. Okay, that is not good. Unmute audio. All right. Oh, that's Ashley. That's not Holly. Okay, Ashley, you want to unmute yourself and say good morning?
Hello, good morning.
Okay. So Ashley is the Associate Director of Communications and Operations for TCN. So we're glad she's joining us today. And the way this works is if you have questions or comments, I'll ask you to put them in the chat box. And then Ashley, will you be able to share those as we go through the presentation? If they fit and you think I can answer it really quickly, that'll be great, or we'll save them all for the end.
No problem.
Okay, terrific. One other note is that everyone can see you. So if your camera is not off, if you are washing dishes, smacking your kids around, we're going to all see it. So just be very mindful of that. And I'm now going to share the screen and I'm going to get us started with the presentation. So today we are talking about managing conflict. And I think it's very pertinent that we talk about it at this time because a lot of us are dealing with situations that we haven't had to before, which can introduce some conflict in the workplace. So I'm going to begin with talking about the prevalence of workplace conflict because you might be surprised to know that if you are, which the highly likelihood of you experiencing some conflict in the workplace is true, then you can see what other organizations information shares. We'll also talk about how it affects our productivity and our relationships with others, some of the benefits, the most common types of conflict, and then some solutions, because we want to get to a point that now we understand that there are some issues and the different types of issues. What can we do to be more successful? And I'll just begin by saying, if you don't think that conflict can be prevalent, you know, we can have conflict with our GPS. I will set my GPS and then argue with the thing all the way to my destination. Like, that's not right. I'm not making that left. I'm not doing that. But in the workplace, it has much more detrimental effects. So a large survey by the Global Human Capital report shows that when they asked individuals, do you deal with conflict in the workplace? Look at these numbers. 21% said frequently and 56% said at least occasionally. So the impact of conflict in the workplace is experienced by many different individuals. 85% of employees say that they experience conflict. And what is sad is that employees spend almost 3 hours a week dealing with conflict. And if we think about that in terms of how it can impact our work, if you are spending that amount of time with an argument with a coworker, with a frustration with a project, with challenges with your managers, that can be pretty significant. And in fact, they say that it cost our American economy about $359 billion. And a small way to kind of think about that within your organization, let's just say that there are 10 people that are experiencing this conflict, and then they get paid $10 an hour. So right now we have $100 of productivity lost. Now multiply that by 3. So that's an impact of $300 worth of impact loss just based on that small example. So it does have financial impact. And then at what level those individuals were asked, do they observe the conflict? Well, several said between the different roles, entry level and frontline. That is where we see it the most, among the worker bees, so to speak. Between line managers and their reports. So this is employees having challenges and conflicts with their bosses. And then different levels of management. Where else do we see conflict in the workplace? What are some of the main causes? Well, who's surprised? I know I'm not surprised that 49% is due to our personalities and our egos. Second is stress. Then we have conflict is caused because of our heavy workload or not enough resources and poor leadership. So those are some of the main causes for us having conflict. And that reduces how we engage as a team. And frightening enough is that when we have conflict in the workplace, people go out of their way, literally go out of their way to avoid an employee or one of their team members who they have a disagreement with. And that's how it impacts our work. Because if I'm having a disagreement with my colleague Sharon, and therefore I'm not willing to talk to her, then how are we getting our work done? Because a lot of our work is interdependent. We should have the same goals. And then what are some of the negative outcomes that we witness? Personal attacks and assault. People call out sick because of conflict. There's some cross-departmental conflict and even bullying. And of course, if there's much conflict, I can't tell you the number of individuals and organizations that I work with that people contact me and say, you know what, I've had it. I'm leaving this place. So you can lose very valuable employees because of conflict in the workplace. So this is why many organizations are helping their teams to understand the prevalence and then how we can resolve it. But not only does the conflict affect our work, it also affects us emotionally. We become demotivated, angry, nervous. And I think back to some of the conflicts that I had when I was working in corporate America. And I started having migraines. At one point, I had stomach ulcers. So it does have an impact on us physically as well. And then we don't take action that just escalates things. So 9 out of 10 employees say that they have experienced conflict that might have started as a little fire blow up. And it takes time for them to dispel. So if we don't do anything, well, that just exacerbates the situation. Look at these numbers. 1 in 3 conflicts took days to dispel. And that's if someone did something. And then some conflict still remains. So whose responsibility is it to ensure that we are managing conflict and working effectively? It's not just HR departments. They're just one cog in the machine. It's all of our decisions. We have to collectively take ownership and accountability in dismissing or diffusing conflict. Because I want you to know that, as you're probably aware, some conflict is healthy, but when it's not good, it's all of our responsibility to manage it. And the way that we're going to get beyond some of the negativity of the bad conflict is that we have to increase our awareness. And once individuals increase not just awareness of the problem, but awareness of their own actions, well, we see that 81% of employees said that the conflict led to a positive outcome because they were able to understand others and also solve the problem. So we know that all that conflict that we talked about is negative. That's how it impacts us in the workplace. So we're not surprised when we hear the statistics that 7 out of 10 employees are disengaged in the workplace. You know what that means? People are showing up, but they're not doing anything. They're not contributing. But there are benefits to when we manage conflict effectively. We can improve our performance because we then remove barriers that were there because we made some assumptions or we misunderstood a task, a strategy, or a goal. Many types of conflict happen, I hate to put it on us leaders, but because we haven't given out the rules or the strategies for engagement or helped individuals to understand who's responsible for what. I hear stories quite often where there's infighting, and that's because there's overlapping responsibility. So Mary thinks it's her job and Sue thinks it's her job, and they both have different ideas on how things can be done. But if we are aligned on our tasks, our strategies, and our goals, that can help us to improve performance. Other benefits of conflict include that it can be constructive because it creates an awareness of how we are experiencing our work. And when we do that, that leads to changes that can help us to improve. And we're going to talk about the importance of awareness so that we can move forward in a very, very productive way. Conflict can be beneficial because it can lead to process improvements. I'm often quoted as saying, your biggest complaint can be your greatest opportunity. So if someone is complaining or having conflict around a process, and it could be an external conflict where it's a customer saying that this system isn't working well for me. Or it could be someone internally saying this process of how we engage with our customers isn't effective. It can reveal a deficiency. I see a couple chats. Ashley, is there anything that we want to share?
There's just one: negativity all the time.
Negativity all the time. Yes. That environment is poison for productivity. And even if you are in a negative environment, you can still excel. And I'll share more about that, but I'm going to tell you, go back to a phrase if you participated in my effective communications training, where I said that life is 10% what happens to you, but 90% how you respond. And by modeling different behaviors and changing our own attitudes, we are in charge of us, and we can help to change environments as well. The other benefit of conflict is clashes of ideas. But when we have clashes of ideas, that actually is a way that people are being creative. So, you know, the process of brainstorming should be one where we're embracing that conflict so that we can understand different perspectives and be able to gather together to take an approach that can lead us ultimately to success. I'm sure you've been in meetings where one person had an idea of how to undergo a challenge and another person had an idea, and both of them think that they're right, and therefore we get a clash. But if we look at that differently, like that idea is different from mine, but how might that work? If we're more open-minded, those clashes of ideas really help us to be creative. So now let's talk about the 4 common types of conflict in the workplace, and then we'll talk about some solutions. Again, this is high level. We've got 1 hour. Usually this training is a minimum of 2 hours, and we do lots of exercises in between to diffuse and to discuss all of these different conflicts. So I'm just going to touch the tip of the iceberg, and then through questions, maybe we can shoot out some more. But this is this anyone's situation? You're having a meeting, you're like, kill me now, right? Because of conflict that might be happening. So let's go through the first. The first is interdependent conflict. So these are types of conflicts that we can have in the workplace. And this happens when someone relies on someone else's cooperation, output, or input in order to get their job done. Example from my own experience is when I was in a sales position. And every week we had to report in our numbers. Now this, folks, is before all the fancy systems we have today. Now you can put in a form and then it'll tally everything up. Back in this day, we all had this Excel spreadsheet, and then we'd have to email it to this one person, and then they were responsible for shooting that information up to management, and got rolled into, the district and then the national goals. Well, the person who was responsible for collecting that information on our team was seen as one of the most unbeloved, to fit it nicely, unbeloved persons, because every month they were like, I need your numbers, I need this, I need that. And it caused so much conflict on the team in terms of that person not seeming nice, not seeming friendly, being too demanding. And the issue was, if this person did not get the cooperation or the numbers that they needed to roll up to management, well, guess what? Management was on them. And therefore, that created what we call an interdependent conflict, because I can't get my work done until someone else does their work, or my work is based on someone else's work. And in organizations, that's most likely what you're experiencing. Anyone experience interdependent conflict? Put in the chat box, yes. Not that you're saying that, it's just something that you could see in the workplace. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's someone you know. We have a few that see it? Ashley, anything you want to read from the chats that might be useful?
It's just a lot of people agreeing. They're saying yes.
Yeah, that's a big one. Thank you so much. So what can we do? When I work with teams on diffusing this interpersonal conflict, I ask them to do what we call some pre-work. So before we even get into discussion, it's important, and I used to bring each person in separately if it was just among two people. And you have to think about, what are your predominant thoughts about the person or the situation? Why do you think that that's important? Why do we need to think about the person or situation? Because we all have images or thoughts in our head about the individual, right? So it's important to write down, I think that they're incompetent. I think that they are just being mean. I think that they are someone who is a perfectionist, that sort of thing. We all have predominant thoughts. Now, let me say this before I continue. All of these situations and strategies that I'll provide for managing conflict are effective with everyone except two particular types of people. It's not effective with bullies, because bullies have no self-awareness. And these strategies are not effective with people who are incompetent. With those individuals, it is necessary to do coaching, counseling, and corrective action before you can even get to trying to resolve the conflict, because those are situations outside of their ability to absorb the necessary skills to be successful. So when I'm working with a team of leaders, people who are managing other people, the first thing they have to do is weed out those two. And then with the rest of the team or with other individuals, you can do this work. But if someone is a bully or if they are incompetent, these strategies don't work well unless, again, through coaching, counseling, and corrective action has taken place first, all right? So when we have these interdependent conflicts, you also have to think, what do I know about the other person's fears, needs, hopes, and desires? Because sometimes we are taking action because we are fearful that we won't get that report in on time. We are taking these actions because we need this information in order to do our jobs. We are taking these actions because our desire is to provide an excellent report, and this person is hindering that. So that is why before you engage in discussion, it's important that you think about these things. And then you think, what do I need to do in order to listen with an open heart and mind to what's happening in their world? That's where the empathy comes in. So when we all on the sales team understood that, okay, Sheila is under pressure to get this done because she needs it for our manager, we all understood better, took into account our impact in the situation, and were able to work more collaboratively to get the information to her. The other type of challenge or conflict that we can have can be due to our differences in styles. It can be due to differences in our leadership styles and our communication styles, just styles on how we work. And if you've participated in some trainings in terms of understanding what your communication style is during the effective communications training, I shared how the one company had to understand their client style, who just like facts and figures, versus the style of the salesperson who wanted to first build a relationship with the person, where they were just like, I just need the numbers. I'm not into all that fluffy stuff. So you might have to understand that people work differently from you so that you can help to manage any situations that might turn into negative conflict. So how do we do this? You really have to get to know your staff and your coworkers better. And what does that mean? Again, understanding how they work. I invite people to think about not just the way, what you do, but how you do what you do. And in this world of remote working, it's important to think about the progress that someone's having versus the process that they take in getting their work done. So getting to know your staff and your coworkers in the beginning of a meeting, ask questions. How was your son's soccer game? Well, no one's doing that anymore right now, but ask questions about how are you managing through this challenging situation? What did you cook for dinner last night? But then ask questions as well about their work. So what do you find most challenging about getting this process done? What way do you like to work? Should I call you? Should I text you? Get to know who they are, their style. And then here's the thing, be able to manage your expectations. Some people are limited in what they do based on who they are. And when I say limited, I don't mean that in a negative way. You can't expect something from someone if they can't give it to you. So you manage, from Michelle, I can understand that the way she works is this way, and therefore I shouldn't expect that she's going to have that report to me 3 days early. That's just not how she does, but I feel confident that I'm going to get it on the day that I need it, because her style is more systematic, where my style might be, quick, fast paced. All right. Now, another type of personality conflict is personality clashes. And remember, from the beginning, this is the most common type of conflict that we see within organizations, because it's ignited about our emotions and our perceptions about other people. It's really about who someone is. And since we're all different, since we all perform differently, we're unique individuals, that is really, if we don't manage our emotions well, if we don't have good perceptions of others, that is the recipe for disaster in workplaces. And this is where a lot of the conflict comes from. And that is why those emotional competencies are important, because personality conflicts seem personal, like she's out to get me, she doesn't like me, that sort of thing. And we have to be able to understand that there are different responses to how we see conflict. There's 5 different ways represented here. There's the my way when we get into conflict. So we try to coerce other people. I'll get him or her to do X, Y, and Z. And then the basis is that I'm going to be the winner and you lose. And the goal, the value of it is that we put the goal over people. Another way that we personally respond to conflict is to evade the conflict. Like I'm going to get out of this. I'm not a part of this. I'll let them have their way. So this person who always avoids conflict, but what we find even with this person who's always avoiding conflict, because they are suppressing it and not dealing with it, they can explode. Another way that we deal with conflict is that we acquiesce. We just give in. All right, if I want to be your friend, if I want to have a good working relationship here, I just got to let you, be just to keep things going, keep the office running. I'm just going to yield. So then we put people over the goal. So start typing in what way that you usually respond to conflict. No one's judging here. How about the halfway? Are you that person where you compromise? Okay, you know what? Let's meet in the middle. These are our natural responses. Our basis is we're trying to make a deal. We want to come to some common resolution. And then the last is collaborate. So I will care for you and I'll work with you. That is another way that we respond. Now, can we respond differently based on the situations? Yes, we can. We certainly, in some situations, here acquiesce, that's mostly me at home. I'm like, you know what, I'll just let hubby, I'll give in. And, later I do what I want to do, but to keep the relationship, I might do that. But depending on maybe a project, you might have to coerce people. And it really isn't about winning or losing, but you've got the winning formula. You've tried this will work. So it can depend on the situation as well, but we're thinking about all the ways we can respond to conflict. Ashley, what do we have in the chat box?
Just a few people explaining themselves. For instance, depends on the situation and specifics. I've done all of these. Some people saying they're evade halfway. Someone said, I vent to friends, but say nothing to the person I have the conflict with.
Mm-hmm. And when we don't do that, I think about the impact that it has on us internally. I believe that is healthy if once you vent and you let it go, it's gone. But if you are venting to someone else about a situation that's happened and you keep venting and you keep venting and keep venting, then that's not healthy. So it's still going to be important to either resolve it internally or to resolve it with that person. We also, thank you for sharing, Ashley. We also have conflict because of differences in gender. Okay? The facts are, folks, that men and women are different. And Barbara Annis with Michael Gurian did a study to look at how we lead, how we perceive, how we think, how we collaborate based on our sexes. So they had over, I believe it was 5 million assessments. They did 3,000, no, not 5 million assessments, 1 million assessments. They did 3,000 workshops. They collected all of this data. And this is what they found, that we have actually brain-based behaviors, differences from men and women, how we perceive, how we problem solve, and how we lead. And I think that's important for several reasons. But one is, scientifically, women have more emotional connectors in our brain. I'm not going to get too medically technical because I don't know all the terms, but we have emotional connectors in our brains. And that impacts the way that, again, we lead, problem solve, and we perceive things. So when we're talking now a lot about the importance of gender diversity, having more women in leadership within organizations. If we don't understand that there are differences between men and women, because that's that awareness piece, that can be a recipe for conflict within those ranks. And here's a small example of what they did in this research. When you ask the question, what do you think? You're working on a project or something and you say, what do you think? Well, men will make a decision and offer their opinion. And they think, okay, that's the end of it. But for women, that is an opening to a conversation. So they're ready to share their thoughts and start interacting and discussing more. So we look at things differently, we perceive things differently. And think about that. When you're in a personal relationship, if you ask someone, a man, what do you think? He's gonna say, well, this is what I think. And then you go, if you're a woman, most likely you'll go, well, this is what I think, because, and perhaps, and maybe, and we just go on. So that is a small example of what they found, but it's important to know, because when it comes to conflict, we have to understand those differences and take them into account. It's not that the man is mean or the man is being short, it's that the way that information is processed and solved is different. So these are the challenges that men expressed. They said, I really don't feel like I can give critical feedback because the rules are always changing and I feel blamed. And women feel excluded or dismissed just based on that question. So apply that to different scenarios in your professional life. If you are a woman and have a male boss, or vice versa, do you see this as a possible challenge? So how can we improve is what we're going to talk about in the strategies. There are also, lastly, differences that we see or conflicts that can happen because of age. And there are many factors that we can consider. When it comes to our age, there are different ways that we like to engage. There are different ways that we problem solve. For younger generation folks, this is not being stereotypical. This is based on all the research and studies. They like to get in a group and let's all brainstorm and let's figure out all the solutions. Where more seasoned professionals who have been in the workplace more years understand that for some things, we can make a decision and move forward. Even acting on ideas has been seen as a different among ages. And what's meant by that is for some who might be younger, they might be more creative and they might come up with an idea and they sometimes don't even ask for permission. And they start implementing that idea and then come back and say, hey, look what I did. And then we're like, what happened? Who did that? Who told you to do that? Right? So there can be those kind of conflicts. There's differences in terms of optimism, as well as there are differences in terms of how we connect. So younger folks are more socially or connected or more hyper connected. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've had managers say, can you come in and tell these young folks to get off of their cell phones all day? But the way they look at it is, I've got my work done and I'm just connecting. And they like to use the different types of technology where some of us might be fearful, older seasoned workers might be fearful of chat, where chat is one of the ways they engage is pretty common to text messaging. I saw a comment come in, Ashley, is that something that we should share or move on? So there are differences in age, which can also impact conflict. But when I train on differences within generations, this is what we need to keep in mind. Based on our career aspirations and based on where we are in our career is the way that we need to look at the differences. Because someone could be at a younger age, but they have maybe aspirations of, getting that promotion. And so their work habits might be different from someone who has been within the organization for 15 years. So they might not be as so focused on getting that promotion versus leading more with confidence. So our age, where we are in our careers have a greater impact on our work habits versus how old we are. But overall, in order to resolve conflict, we have to identify the story that we tell, especially when it comes to personality conflict. So most times when there's a situation, we think about, is it my fault or was it someone else's fault? And sometimes our stories are accurate, but most often our stories can be either inaccurate, incomplete, or wrong. And the truth is often somewhere in between the story that we've told ourselves about the other person and why they're acting the way they are and what the facts actually are. So let's look at an example. Here's a situation or scenario. Someone lets you down and it's not the first time. The story you tell is that they are irresponsible and unreliable. But you let someone down and it's not the first time. The story you tell is, well, I've been overworked recently. Someone cut you off while you're driving and you say they're rude, aggressive, and inconsiderate. But you cut someone off and you say, well, I'm in a hurry. And if I don't catch these lights, I'm going to miss my appointment. Here's another. One of your peers who you don't like buys the boss a birthday card. And you say, well, it's because they're sucking up to the boss and they're trying to weasel their way into a promotion. But then you buy the boss a birthday card and you say, oh, that's because I'm just so warm and caring. So these are the situations and these are the stories we tell ourselves. So the key is to understand what's the story. when you list out what the scenario is and what the facts are and understanding your story, it ensures that you don't overreact. Because quite often, what the story is, and when we sift the facts out, we find out that, maybe it is a little different. And when we do that, that also helps us to have a healthy discussion versus ambushing the other person, and sift those facts from the story. So how can we do this? We have to manage our emotions and then increase our objectivity about the situation. You have to look at this almost like, if it was what it really is and what maybe some other person might see who wasn't emotionally engaged. So here's an example. You don't like your boss. The story you tell is that she's rude. She doesn't value my opinion. I don't trust her. I don't like her. She's got a hidden agenda. She doesn't value what I do. If she could sell me up the river, she would. And it's not my job to find out why she doesn't like me. She's the boss. But here are the facts. She just doesn't acknowledge you when she walks past your desk. And I haven't had any one-on-ones with her in the past month. And her diary is probably very full. And she's being asked to juggle a lot of balls by senior management. And she has attended meetings I've run and asked detailed and insightful questions about the work that we are doing. See, those are really the facts. But then our emotions can get in the way and skew that story. Can anybody relate to that or has seen that? Ashley, anything in the chat box?
Yes, totally. Yes, yes.
Yeah. We've all seen it. We all have witnessed, if we've not been a part of that conflict ourselves. And that's why if you want to resolve conflict, it's important to see yourself, that self-awareness. So we're not going to raise our voices. We're going to improve our argument. And how do we communicate? We have to think that communication is more. It's much more than your words. It's about your body language. It's about your the way you say things. So it's not just what you say, but it's how you say it. Because I can fold my arms now and say, I'm not mad. Of course I'm mad. So we have to understand that the meaning is conveyed with more than words. It's important to make statements and then ask questions for information. I most always advise individuals to think this way. Ask yourself, is this going to be helpful? Is it going to be hurtful? Will it make a difference? When you're communicating, if you think those three things first, it might change what you say and how you say it. To improve communication, to resolve conflict, use I instead of you. And that would look like this. Instead of saying, you didn't turn in the report on time, you could say, I didn't receive the report on time. Do you see that difference? You didn't share the information that I needed for the senior management team. I didn't get the information that was necessary for the senior management team. So you turn it around so that we can break down some of the blame and putting people in an uncomfortable situation. How many people are going to try to use more I instead of you in communication? Raise your hand or say, yes, I will in the chat box. It's also important to be open. When we are vulnerable that enables us to see ourselves differently, but it also enables us to see opportunities as well. And that builds curiosity so that you can think differently in order to get results. So be open, negotiate on the things that matter. Some people have conflict on things like, does it really matter? Does it really matter? You have to think about that. And then for the things that don't matter, let them go. It's not about winning the argument. It's about the end goal of resolving the situation. And as always, caring has to come before confrontation. Caring about the other person, caring that the situation will be resolved effectively, and caring for yourself. That at the end of this interpersonal conflict where Janie doesn't realize the importance of me getting that information to do my work, or that personality conflict where Sam is just someone who doesn't respect his coworkers. You have to be able to care. What is the fear? What is the need? What is the hope or desire of that person? Some people I found just, they like conflict because it gets them attention. And if that is that person, then don't feed that attention. But how do we show caring before confrontation? Well, talk simply. And what do we mean by simplicity of speech? Going back up to here, making statements. What I found challenging is when I can't get my work done. That's really simple. Empathy of attitude. So being willing to look at the other person's situation. Why is Sam so angry at the end of the month or at the end of these meetings? And get to the root cause, and then being honest. Being honest about it. Not that we're going to solve individual problems, but we can move forward with greater understanding and clarity in order to reduce some of the conflict that we experience. I see a lot of blinks in the chat. Anything we want to share, Ashley?
Not right now. No.
Okay.
You're good.
So how do we resolve conflict? We understand that conflict is very challenging. It impacts engagement, impacts collaboration, our relationships, and productivity. And we know that there are different types of conflict that can happen, but we also know that there are some benefits to conflict. So what do? You first have to identify the problem. Or another way to put it is we have to acknowledge that there is a problem. Do you remember some of those earlier slides where I said sometimes it takes 1 to 3 days before someone even recognizes that there's a conflict, and then it can take up to 9 days later before something is, it actually resolves, and something is done. So we have to identify and have an awareness that the problem exists. So what is it? Is it an age? Is it a gender thing? Is it a process? Is it a personality? What is the cause? And then gather the facts. This is what happened, and this was the result. I didn't get the report. I wasn't able to make the meetings. And the facts are that it impacted productivity. The facts are that it made me feel disengaged. The facts are that the assignment wasn't complete. Those are the facts. And now we want to clarify the interests of the parties. What does that mean? Why is it important? And what is the impact that this conflict is having on the individuals? Because if we don't understand the why, then we'll be revisiting this again. So this is important to Sally for these reasons. And this is important to frank for these reasons. So we need to understand the interests of the parties, why it's important, and the impact that it has. And when you understand the why, that should be your driver. That should be the reason why you want to resolve the conflict. Then determine the objective or outcome. So what is our goal? What do we want to happen at the end of this discussion? At the end of this discussion, I want to have clarity around what my role is on this project. At the end of this discussion, I want to understand better what Bob's role is. Again, some conflict can happen because of overlapping resources. If it's not, again, a bully situation or incompetence, then we should be able to come up with some outcomes. What's the outcome we want to have? I want to have my reports on time. I want to be able to set a good agenda for the meetings, but that is always thrown off because other people have competing needs for that meeting. So we have to determine what we want to happen, and then you start brainstorming. Okay, these are some solutions so that we can resolve this conflict. And then lastly, you have to implement a solution. The worst thing that can happen is that you are working to resolve a problem, and then you get to the end and you go, okay, all right, see you later, everybody. Well, we haven't implemented that solution. So maybe the solution is we need to give the report to Sam 4 days in advance. Maybe the solution is, if it's a personality thing, that that you all agree that you'll try to have coffee together once a month and get to know each other a little better. If it is a issue on team, how you engage because of your age. Younger people like to do things differently. Why not get to know that person a little better and why they feel that that is a good resolution? So you have to implement a solution. Now, maybe the solution that you implement, okay, then you have to revisit it. Okay, after you tried a week, oh, this is not working. You come right back to the steps and start all over. Because the key is that we want to get the benefits of conflict, right? So what are some solutions? Again, we have to have that self-awareness. We have to understand our role or the story that we're telling ourselves. Ask those clarifying questions. Listen more. When it comes to conflict, everybody wants to talk. But if you listen more and do that active listening to actually hear what the other person is saying, you're going to recognize something different than maybe you had before. Write things down, then repeat them. When you're in conversation, what I hear you say is, let me rephrase that. The problem that you have is, the challenge that you've outlined is. So you want to make sure you understand and then be sensitive, because maybe Sam gets frustrated because he doesn't think anybody cares or understands his role and the impact of others on him being successful in getting his job done. And you have to make time to resolve these conflicts. We shared how if they go on, it just creates a virus within organizations. So just like anything else, it is important to take time to resolve your conflicts. And then lastly, understand that we're different. I was just listening to a presentation on YouTube this morning, and they talked about a set of conjoined twins, and they were identical twins, but they fought to be separated because although they were identical in their body and their appearances, they weren't identical in their brains. One was more extroverted, one was more introverted, one wanted to be a lawyer, another wanted to be a computer scientist. So even with identical twins, who we would think would be all alike, they are different. So we have to understand and recognize that we do have differences, but just because we have differences doesn't mean that we have to have disagreement. So once you go through the steps of recognizing, rather resolving conflict, the next thing that you want to do is be able to answer these 6 questions to know if you were successful going through the process. So did you identify the issues which required a discussion? If you're having a meeting with someone, it is okay to have a cheat sheet and write these questions down, especially if you're doing this for the first time. You're going to say, did we identify what the issues were? Maybe you state that at the end. Did we make a decision? So did we come to a resolution on this conflict and how we're going to deal with it? Did we reduce the tension on the team? This is how we're going to measure success. Did you help team members to develop skills to manage the conflict in the future? That's a question that a leader might ask. And then lastly, did everyone involved have a chance to give their input? If you answer yes to these questions, then you are on your way to success in terms of helping your team and yourself deal with conflict. And when you do that, you'll get these amazing results. What outcomes have people experienced once they became more proactive and took things less personally? Better understanding of others, improved workplace relationships, better solutions to problems. The teams are performing higher. There's increased motivation. New ideas are being born. Now we got the naysayers down there. 24% said nothing, no positives. Maybe those were the bullies. Maybe the process wasn't implemented well, but a great majority of individuals share how they have benefited in a positive way. So what are those ways? Improving performance, being constructive. All of these are benefits of conflict. Improving our processes, then being able to implement creative solutions. If your challenge is over, we should do it using process A and Mike is using process B, but you come to some agreement. Now you've got to create a solution. And of course, it increases engagement. So those are the benefits. Those are the types of challenges you can have. And those are some solutions. And as we close, I want to remind you, we've got a couple other trainings coming up, workplace values, where we'll talk about your values are how you work and the things that are important to you in your work and how you can demonstrate your workplace values and encourage others is what that training is going to be about. And then we have group coaching for leaders. Whether you're a leader now or a leader to be, you can participate. And you can find us on these channels. And you can also visit my website for more information. So now we will take a couple questions, or maybe Ashley, you will read off some things that individuals have shared. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see. Any questions? And you can unmute yourself if you have any questions. Yes, this is being recorded. Some folks are going to use the I statements. Terrific. You'll get a copy of this. Next, so I always end with this. We've got, 1 minute left. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat box one thing that you're going to do differently as a result of what you heard today. One thing you're going to do differently. Maybe you are going to try to listen more. Maybe you will be more empathetic. Maybe you'll try to understand another person's point of view, or you're going to sift out the facts from what the story is that you're telling yourself. Love this. I'm going to work on using the different statements. Listen more, be more empathetic. Yes. The listening is a big part. You know, we get so busy in our work lives and we're just so on the go, and we know what our own agenda is, but actually taking the time to hear the concerns of others, that makes us better all around. So we're all done here, folks. I appreciate you joining. We're going to send out an email with all this information. And I hope that you have a wonderful week. And hopefully I will see you next week on Workplace Values. Take care. Bye-bye.